tonight, you're invited somewhere quiet, somewhere above the noise of the world, to a rooftop garden cafe where the rain falls gently, lanterns glow softly, and every breath begins to slow down. This is a place made for tired minds, for overthinkers, for anyone who just needs a peaceful night. So find a comfortable spot, let the sound of the rain hold you, and allow this sleep story to guide you gently toward rest. You're safe here, you're welcome here, and you don't have to think about anything anymore. Just relax and let the night take care of you. The alleyway tea vendor beneath golden lamps. Night arrives gently in this part of the city, not with noise, not with rush, but like a soft shawl being wrapped around tired shoulders. The streets grow quieter, one shop at a time drifting into darkness. Windows dim, doors close, footsteps fade into distance until even the echoes seem sleepy. Above the rooftops, the sky turns a deep velvet blue, sprinkled with faint starlight that peeks through drifting clouds. And somewhere between two old brick buildings, where a narrow alleyway opens like a quiet secret, a warm golden glow begins to bloom. It comes from the lamps. They hang in a crooked line overhead, old brass frames holding soft golden light, each one surrounded by a little halo of mist. Their glow doesn't shout or sparkle. It simply rests there, patient and kind, as if it has all the time in the world. Beneath those lamps stands a small tea cart, wood worn smooth by years of gentle use, a copper kettle that reflects the lights in warm ripples, stacked cups that wait calmly for hands to hold them. And beside the cart, moving unhurriedly, is the tea vendor. Their motions are slow and practiced, as familiar as breathing. The gentle clink of porcelain, the whisper of steam, the soft swirl of liquid filling cups, every sound blends into the night like part of a soothing lullaby. This alley doesn't rush anyone. It doesn't expect anything from you. It doesn't ask you to be productive, clever, or strong. It simply welcomes you. You can imagine yourself arriving here now. You step off the main road, leaving behind streetlights and traffic and unfinished thoughts. The stones beneath your feet are slightly damp, holding the day's memory of rain. The air is cool, touched by the delicate fragrance of brewing tea, notes of cardamom, honey, and something softly floral you can't quite name. The golden light settles across your shoulders. Your breathing begins to slow, without effort, without trying. Thoughts that had been tangled slowly begin to loosen, like knots coming free in water. You don't need to solve anything right now. You don't need to remember perfectly or plan ahead. You are simply here, in a small alleyway beneath warm golden lamps, where the night is kind and time moves gently. The tea vendor glances up now and then, not with curiosity, not with expectation, but with the quiet recognition of someone who understands tiredness. someone who knows that sometimes the greatest comfort is simply having a place to rest for a moment without explanation. The kettle hums softly. Steam curls lazily into the glow, making the lights look like tiny moons floating in amber mist. Somewhere far away, a distant train sighs, and the city settles a little deeper into night. And here, in this tucked away corner of the world, a story is waiting to unfold, not loudly, not urgently, but slowly, like tea leaves opening in warm water. A story of gentle lamps, of warm cups, of unhurried conversations, and of the calm that finds you when you finally stop chasing it. You're safe here. Let the night hold you. Let the tea steam rise softly. Let the story begin. The alleyway is not obvious from the main street. It doesn't call out, and it doesn't compete with brighter signs or louder corners. Instead, it rests quietly between two older buildings, where the bricks are softened by time and the windows lean slightly inward, as if they have been listening to conversations for many years. You notice it only when you slow down. Maybe your steps grow tired. Maybe your thoughts finally stop rushing forward. Or maybe you simply look up at the right moment, and the angle of the golden lamps catches your eye. They form a gentle line overhead, swaying ever so slightly in the faint breeze, as if nodding in greeting. Their glow spills downward like warm honey, settling across the damp stones and turning puddles into tiny pools of gold. The world outside the alley feels distant now. Cars hum like a memory. Footsteps blur into softness, and the sky, framed between the roofs, stretches deep and serene. As you enter, it feels like stepping into another pace entirely, one designed for unhurried evenings and thoughtful pauses. The tea vendor's cart sits near the center, positioned as though it has always belonged there. The wood of the cart is darkened by age and polished smooth by gentle hands. Small drawers remain half open, holding teas wrapped carefully in paper, each one labeled with faded ink and careful handwriting. Some carry names you recognize: chamomile, mint, lavender, while others are more mysterious, written in flowing script that hints at faraway places and long, quiet histories. A tiny bell hangs from the edge of the cart. It doesn't ring loudly. Instead, when the breeze passes, it gives a soft, delicate note that drifts through the alley, the kind of sound that seems to fade not into silence but into deeper quiet. The vendor moves slowly, in no rush to fill the kettle, no rush to pour, no rush to finish. They handle each cup as though it matters, because here, every small thing is treated as something meaningful. Steam rises from the copper kettle, curling upward in elegant spirals until it melts into the lamplight. There are a few wooden stools positioned nearby, not arranged in straight lines, not identical, each one different in height, shape, and texture, as though they have arrived here over time. gathered from different places, each carrying its own story. When you sit, the stool creaks gently, as if acknowledging your presence. The scent of tea reaches you fully now, soft spice, warm leaves, a hint of citrus, something sweet and almost nostalgic, like the memory of a peaceful evening you once had, even if you can't quite place when. You let your shoulders sink slightly. You hadn't realized they were tense until just now. The vendor finally looks up. Their expression is not curious, not examining, simply welcoming in a way that doesn't ask questions. Their eyes hold the same warmth as the lamps overhead, the kind of warmth that invites you to rest without needing to earn it. A quiet nod, a simple gesture toward the cups, an invitation to sit, to pause, to allow the night to do what nights sometimes do best, gently loosen the grip of overthinking. You notice details more clearly now that you're still. The cobblestones beneath your feet are damp, reflecting soft reflections of the lights above. Water from earlier rain has collected around the edges, but it doesn't drip or splash. Everything is motionless, like the moment after the last raindrop falls and the world exhales quietly. Somewhere deeper in the alleyway, potted plants climb gently up the wall, ivy, fern, small flowering vines with pale petals that glow faintly in the soft light. They add a hint of green to the golden palette of the evening. You can hear the tea beginning to simmer, a low, steady murmur, not a boil, just a soothing hum. Steam rises again, thicker now, curling into soft shapes that disappear as quickly as they form. And then the vendor speaks, not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft, steady voice, like someone talking beside a fire late at night when the world has already gone quiet. Long days, the vendor says gently, as if stating something universally understood. The night is kinder. The words linger in the air. They aren't advice. They aren't instruction. They're simply a reminder that not every part of life requires effort or solving. The vendor pours tea into a cup, the liquid flowing in an unbroken ribbon, catching glimmers of amber under the lamp glow. The porcelain barely makes a sound when it meets the wooden cart, and the rising aroma deepens, warm, soothing, steadying. When the cup is placed before you, the warmth radiates through your fingers. Not too hot, not too cool, simply perfect. You lift it slowly, noticing the way the steam brushes gently against your face, like a quiet greeting. For a moment, there is nothing to do except breathe, in and out, letting each sip move slowly, as though time itself has softened. You glance around again. Farther back in the alley, there are shelves attached to the brick wall. On them rest small objects collected across years, a lantern with cracked glass, a compass missing its needle, an old clock that no longer ticks, glass jars filled with dried leaves, bits of twine, folded scraps of paper. None of these things seem valuable, yet every one of them looks cared for, chosen, kept. The vendor follows your gaze. People leave things, they say softly, little stories, pieces they were done carrying. You realize then, this alley isn't just a place for tea. It is a place for setting things down. Not burdens in dramatic ways. Not confessions or explanations. Just thoughts you've been tired of holding. The night gathers them gently, not to judge them, but to remove their weight. The kettle quiets a little. The lamps sway again. A cat appears at the far end of the alley, grey, soft, moving with lazy confidence. It walks as though it belongs here, more than anywhere else in the world. Without even looking at you, it circles once near the cart, settles near the vendor's feet, and closes its eyes. The vendor pours themselves a cup now. For a moment, both of you sit together in silence, a comfortable silence, one that doesn't feel empty. The kind of silence where breathing feels easier and thoughts drift more slowly, floating rather than pressing. A gentle breeze carries faint hints of the city, distant bakery sweetness, rain-damp stone, and somewhere far off, the fading echo of music from an open window. All of it arrives delicate and softened, like background brushstrokes on a painting. The vendor eventually speaks again. There is something about tea, they murmur, the way it asks you to wait, to sit with the warmth, to be patient while it unfolds. Their voice is like the night itself, soft, steady, unworried. You take another sip. Time stretches out in front of you, not like a task, but like a place, a gentle landscape where nothing sharp grows and nothing rushes forward. Thoughts that once felt urgent begin to drift like clouds, each one light, slow and distant. The lamps glow brighter for a moment as a new mist rolls lazily through the alley, thickening the air just slightly. You watch as the golden beams soften, blurring edges, turning everything velvety. The vendor opens another drawer, this one filled with small parchment packets tied with string. They handle them carefully, lifting them as though each contains something precious. One is placed aside, then another, arranged with deliberate calm. These, they say, are teas from journeys. People send them back when they find quiet. They like to share. The idea is comforting that somewhere out there, quiet moments are discovered and sent back into the world to become tea, that even faraway peace can make its way here, one leaf at a time, another sip, another breath, another pause that deepens into stillness. A soft rain begins again, barely noticeable at first, just a faint whisper as droplets brush the rooftops above. The lamps glow softer still, halos widening with each gentle shimmer of moisture. Nothing becomes cold. Instead, the rain feels like part of the lull, a gentle rhythm tapping lightly in the distance. The cat opens one eye, then closes it again. The vendor sets a new kettle on slowly, and the alley feels complete, somehow, as though everything in it is exactly as it is meant to be. No decisions required, no expectations waiting, just golden lamps, warm cups, and the quiet certainty that the night will hold everything gently until morning comes. You finish your tea at your own pace. There is no rush to stand, no signal that your time here has ended, only the unspoken truth that you may stay as long as you need. The vendor gives a faint smile, not wide, not insistent, just the kind that feels like a soft blanket tucked in around you. And as you sit, breathing slower, shoulders softer, mind quieter than before, the golden lamps continue to glow, steady, patient, unhurried, as if they have waited all along not for answers, but simply for your presence. The night deepens softly, and the story is only just beginning. The rain remains gentle, not a storm, not a rush, just a soft, steady whisper that moves across the rooftops and drifts into the alleyway, like a lullaby being hummed from somewhere unseen. The golden lamps respond to it almost tenderly, their halos widening and softening as each drop catches and scatters their light. The cobblestones glisten richer now, streaked with liquid reflections that ripple when the breeze sighs softly through. You hold the memory of warmth from your cup in your hands, even though it's nearly empty. The heat lingers faintly across your palms, like an echo of comfort that doesn't disappear too quickly. The tea vendor lifts the kettle with practiced ease, not hurried, not mechanical. Every movement suggests familiarity, like someone following a rhythm they've learned by heart. Steam rises again, a calm signal that another cup is waiting to be born. One of the small stools near you is turned slightly, as if someone had been sitting there recently and only stood up moments before. A folded scrap of paper sits on it, weighted by a smooth stone. The edges of the paper curl softly from humidity. The vendor notices you looking. They leave notes sometimes. They say gently, little thoughts they don't want to carry into tomorrow. Their fingers brush the paper with care, but they don't open it. It's enough that they chose to set them down. Something about that settles into you like the weight of a comforting blanket. The idea that not every worry needs to be solved. Some can simply be placed somewhere safe and left behind. The kettle begins to murmur the familiar, almost meditative hum you heard earlier. The sound fills the space between breaths, smoothing everything around it. The vendor selects another tea. This one comes from a small tin with a faded sketch of mountains across its lid. When it opens, a faint aroma drifts upward, earthy, grounded, touched lightly by something sweet. This one, the vendor says softly, was sent from someone who lives near quiet hills. Wind moves differently there, slower, more patient. They sprinkle leaves into the waiting cup with steady hands. Theirs was a letter about learning how to rest. The vendor continues thoughtfully. Not by winning rest, not by finishing everything first, just by allowing it. The tea sits steeping. You feel the patience inside this moment, not as something forced, not as discipline, but as a natural unfolding, like the night itself taking slow, graceful breaths. The cat shifts near the vendor's feet and curls into a tighter circle. It tucks its head into its paws, as if even dreams here know not to hurry. Somewhere deeper in the alley, a hanging plant sways with the breeze. Raindrops gather on its leaves and fall one by one, not rhythmically, but gently, as though deciding individually when it's time to let go. You lean back slightly, feeling the wooden stool cradle your posture. Your shoulders sink further, your brow unwinds, your thoughts become softer shapes, drifting rather than pressing forward. The vendor pours the new tea. This time the aroma is richer, warm earth, quiet sweetness, and something like distant summer fields after a light rain. You wrap your hands around the cup and feel warmth expand outward. You don't have to talk, the vendor says kindly. People sometimes think they should, but silence has its own conversations. It's true. The night itself seems to be speaking in subtle gestures, the sway of lamps, the hush of rain, the delicate clink of porcelain now and again. Across the alley, a small wooden sign hangs crookedly from a nail. The words on it are nearly worn away, but you can make out a few letters. Stay as long as you need. You take your next sip slowly. The warmth travels gently, not in a rush, not overwhelming. Just steady, grounding, invite light. As you drink, your eyes wander again to the shelves lined along the brick wall. You notice something you missed before. A stack of postcards tied together with string. The edges are worn, corners softened, colors faded to delicate shades. Each card bears an image of a different place: quiet harbors, misty forests, snow-covered fields, beaches at dusk. The vendor follows your gaze again. Travelers, they explain softly. Some pass through and sit here before moving on. They like to leave behind glimpses, little windows into where they've been. They touch the bundle lightly. Peace looks different everywhere, but it feels the same. The rain grows slightly steadier for a moment, still soft, still careful, just enough to deepen the sound, turning it into a comforting blanket of noise that wraps the alley in quiet insulation. Everything beyond the entrance fades even further away. You sip again. The flavor unfolds in layers, as though the tea itself holds a story inside it, one that doesn't demand attention, but rewards stillness. The vendor retrieves a cloth and begins gently wiping the cart's surface, though it hardly needs cleaning. The gesture feels like a ritual, an act of care rather than necessity. Years ago, they begin softly. This alley wasn't quiet. Their voice holds no weight, No tension, only reflection. There were deliveries and shouting and constant movement. People hurried through without ever noticing the lamps. The tea kettle belonged to my father then. He brewed for workers. Strong, quick cups meant to be taken fast. They pause. The cloth moves slowly across the wood. But one night, the power went out along the whole street. Everything stopped. No shouting, no deliveries, just lanterns and rain. A faint smile touches their lips. That was the first time someone stayed, sat, breathed, and realized this space could be gentle if we let it. You picture it, the same alley, quieter than ever before, discovering itself in stillness. The vendor sets the cloth aside. After that, things softened. People learned the way here, not because it was advertised, but because quiet places always call to tired minds. Your mind drifts at those words, not sharply, not with analysis, just drifts like a paper boat carried on a calm stream. You notice the airflow of the alley, how the breeze seems to move in slow spirals, guiding the steam upward before turning it back into the lamplight. Everything feels circular, unhurried, repeating gently like a breathing rhythm. Expand, pause, settle, then begin again, slower than before. The kettle sighs again as it warms. Another small bell tone floats lightly, the breeze nudging the thin metal just enough to let out a peaceful note. It doesn't announce, it simply exists. Across the alley, deeper into the shadows, a doorway sits half hidden, not mysterious, just unimportant enough to blend naturally into the bricks. A small mat rests before it, worn smooth by years of footfalls. On it sits a pair of shoes, neatly placed, side by side, as though someone left them there long ago and trusted they'd remain undisturbed. Someone once lived above the alley. The vendor says, noticing where you look, they kept their window open, even on cool nights. Said the sound of this place helped them sleep. There is warmth in the vendor's voice, not pride, but gratitude. They sent me a letter once. It said, "Thank you for the gentle noises." They hold the pieces of my thoughts until morning. A pause settles between you. Gentle, comfortable, like a deep exhale that continues long after the breath has left. The cat stirs again, stretching slowly, each movement deliberate, graceful, untroubled. It rises, pads softly across the cobblestones, and sits at the edge of a puddle, watching raindrops ripple its reflection. You notice how each ripple begins and disappears without resistance. None fight to stay. None insist on being permanent. They simply arrive, expand, fade, and make room for the next. The vendor refills your cup without asking. The gesture isn't intrusive, more like a quiet reassurance. There is more warmth if you need it. You wrap your hands around the cup again, letting the steam brush softly across your face. It reminds you not of anything specific, but of a general sense of being safe, of being allowed to exist without expectation. Behind the cart, mounted on the wall, hangs a small chalkboard. Written upon it in rounded, unhurried handwriting are a few lines. Tonight's blends, quiet lantern, evening river, restful garden. Names that sound less like flavors and more like places within the night itself. Names help people imagine. The vendor says, noticing your interest. It's easier to rest when you feel like you're arriving somewhere gentle. You nod slightly, understanding. Another breeze glides through, stirring the ivy, carrying fresh rain scent across the alley, clean, earthy, renewing. You inhale naturally, without thinking about it, and feel your chest loosen a little more. Somewhere high above, the clouds shift. They don't part. They simply move, letting the night deepen in tone, not darker in a heavy way, but darker in richness, like ink settling onto a page. A faint humming sound reaches you, not mechanical, not distracting. It might be a distant street light, or perhaps the vibration of the lamps themselves, warmed by rain and time. Whatever it is, the sound blends effortlessly into the quiet, forming a soft undercurrent. The vendor takes another sip of their own tea. When people arrive here, they say gently. They often think they must explain why they're tired or why their thoughts won't sit still. But the night already understands. Another small silence. No pressure for a reply. No expectation of conversation. The tea continues to warm you from the inside out. Your body feels slightly heavier, not with fatigue, but with ease, like settling more fully into a comfortable bed. A pigeon lands briefly on the edge of a rooftop, shakes rain from its feathers, then shelters beneath a small overhang. Even its movements seem quieter here, softened by the atmosphere. There is a feeling, subtle but unmistakable, that the alley protects its calmness the way a garden protects its flowers, not with fences or rules, but with gentle consistency. You hear the vendor gather something, a small wooden box from beneath the cart. They place it on the surface and open it slowly. Inside are dozens of folded notes, different sizes, different textures, some stained faintly by rain or tea. These, they say, are the ones people didn't want to take back. They lift one, not to read aloud, only to hold. Not secrets, not confessions, just thoughts that had grown tired of being thought. They place it back and close the lid softly, as though tucking in a sleeping child. The lamps sway again, their motion so slight it feels almost imagined. Their golden glow deepens, warming everything they touch, the bricks, the puddles, the edges of the cart, and your own hands wrapped gently around the porcelain. The rain softens once more, falling now in the lightest of drizzles. You can hear the water collecting in narrow channels along the stones, forming tiny streams that win their way toward the mouth of the alley, before disappearing. The night feels endless in the most comforting way. Not heavy, not vast, just open, like a soft sky that stretches quietly, willing to hold any unspoken thoughts safely within it. The vendor glances upward. Some nights, they say, it feels as if the lamps remember everyone who has ever sat beneath them, as though they glow a little brighter each time someone rests here. You imagine that, memories gently layered in light, not burdens, just traces of peace left behind. Another sip. The flavor is milder now, cooler, drifting toward the end of its warmth. It matches the feeling inside your chest, gentle, steady calm, settling deeper than before. The cat returns and curls beside your stool this time, back pressed lightly against the wood. You can feel its soft presence near your ankle, quiet, trusting, content. There is nothing else to do, nothing to achieve here, nothing to organize, prove, or decide. The alleyway asks only one thing: to let the night hold what you don't need to hold alone. The kettle makes a final sigh, settling into silence. The vendor switches to another small flame, readying a fresh pot without rush. Even the water, they say softly, needs time to rest between moments of heat. The thought is oddly comforting that even simple things deserve pauses, that cycles of warmth and quiet are natural, necessary. A faint mist drifts in again, curling at ankle height, rising only slightly before dissolving. It makes the alley feel even more like a dream, a place suspended gently outside ordinary pace. The vendor leans back slightly, hands loosely folded. You can come back to this space, they say, even when you're far from here. Just remember the lamps and the sound of the rain. Their voice carries no insistence. It's simply an offering. The rain continues whispering. The lamps continue glowing. Your breath continues slowing, naturally, effortlessly, matching the unhurried rhythm of this hidden corner. And somewhere within you, the thought arrives. You don't have to hold everything tonight. You let that realization rest quietly inside, like a warm stone in your pocket. And the alley, with its golden lamps and patient tea, keeps you company, just as it has kept so many others, in evenings stretched gently across time. The night deepens another shady, and the story drifts onward, softer still. The next evening came wrapped in the same soft twilight that seemed to know this alley by heart. The world outside the narrow street faded into distant murmurs, like gentle waves dissolving along a quiet shore. And once again, the golden lamps flickered awake one by one, lifting their warm glow toward the dusky sky. They did not rush. They did not demand attention. They rose as though they breathed, and with their rising, a quiet invitation returned. The small tea stall waited where it always had, steady as a familiar memory. The kettle rested upon the gentle blue flame, already producing a soft rolling hum that matched the unhurried rhythm of the evening. Steam curled outward and drifted toward the light, thin and calm, as if carrying unspoken thoughts away into the night where they could lose their weight. The scent of tea leaves, touched by cardamom and wisps of vanilla, wrapped itself into the alley's corners like a comforting blanket. Tonight felt different, though nothing looked different at all. That was the odd beauty of this place. The sameness was soothing, and yet each night carried its own quiet layer of meaning. A leaf fell from the nearby tree, landing near the worn stool where travelers rested. A soft breeze traced the cobblestones, lifting tiny specks of dust in the lamplight like drifting constellations. The alley did not promise adventure. It promised rest, and rest has its own kind of mystery. The tea vendor lifted the kettle with practiced ease, letting the liquid swirl before pouring it into a small clay cup. The sound was gentle, soft, steady, a tiny waterfall in the middle of the city. He set the cup down on the counter and simply listened. The world beyond the alley buzzed with obligation and urgency, but here the air seemed to hum with patience. Those who entered carried that buzz within them. Those who left carried something lighter. A man in a navy coat approached first. His steps were slow, not because he lacked strength, but because he lacked direction. He paused beneath the warm glow of a lamp, exhaled, and then moved closer to the store. His eyes looked tired, though not from lack of sleep. They looked tired from thinking too much. He sat on one of the small stools and let his shoulders fall. The vendor poured him tea without needing to ask, as though the night itself had already whispered the request. The man wrapped his hands around the cup. He didn't speak. The tea didn't insist. The air between them stayed peaceful and unfilled, allowing thoughts to slow until they eventually softened into silence. Silence in this alley was not empty. It was healing. Further down the path, a cat padded along the edge of a wall, tail flicking lazily under the lamp's gold wash. It paused at the corner, looked toward the store, and then stretched before curling into a circle near a potted plant. Even the animals seemed to understand that this narrow, golden, lit world existed for stillness. The tea vendor wiped the counter, not out of necessity, but because the motion itself was soothing. The cloth glided across the wood in slow arcs, leaving faint marks that disappeared as quickly as worrying thoughts fade when no one feeds them. Somewhere beyond the alley, a soft wind chime sang once and then went quiet again. Everything whispered in gentle intervals, never demanding attention, only offering presence. As the evening deepened, another visitor approached. A woman carrying a notebook pressed lightly to her chest. She looked like someone who had gathered too many ideas throughout the day and needed to set them down somewhere, softer than her own thoughts. She smiled quietly at the vendor, took a seat, and rested the notebook beside her. The vendor poured tea. Steam rose like a soft dream, passing between them without a word, drifting upward toward the golden lamps, as though the night carried every story safely away. The woman touched the cup to warm her fingertips, and then opened her notebook, not to write, but simply to stare at the blank page. Somehow the blankness here felt less demanding, almost forgiving. It said, "You don't need to finish anything tonight." The golden lamps cast long, gentle shadows behind every object. The stall's old wooden signs swayed slightly, creaking in the friendliest way. A small puddle reflected the lamps like tiny pools of captured moons. Nothing was grand. Nothing was dramatic. Everything existed in measured, tender quiet. Every so often, people walked past the alley entrance, unaware of the stillness hidden inside. Their hurried steps echoed faintly and then vanished. The alley did not chase them. It simply waited for those who wandered unwillingly, for those who needed warmth without explanation. The tea vendor moved with deliberate grace. Scoop, stir. He did not rush the leaves as they steeped. He did not press the flavor as though intensity mattered. Instead, he allowed the water and leaves to find their own pace, a reminder that the best things deepen slowly, quietly, without force. A faint fog began to settle near the ground, softening the edges of the cobblestones until everything looked slightly blurred, like a memory you trust more because it feels gentle. The lamps brightened within the haze, turning the entire alley into a pathway of gold. Even the night sky seemed to lean closer, as though curious about the softness below. The man in the navy coat took his final sip and closed his eyes briefly. He seemed lighter now, the lines in his expression eased. He placed the empty cup down carefully, as though not wanting to disturb the balance of things. The vendor nodded with understanding. Words, once again, were unnecessary. The man walked away slowly, but not aimlessly this time. He left like someone walking within a quiet dream. The woman with the notebook watched the steam rise and then slowly closed the cover. She hadn't written a single word, yet when she stood, she looked as though something inside her had finally unclenched. She thanked the tea vendor with a small smile and carried her notebook like something gently restored. The alley grew quieter. The city, in contrast, grew louder, but the alley did not mirror the city. It held to its rhythm, the steady breath of the kettle, the soft glow of the lamps, the quiet companionship between night and tea. This place wasn't hidden. It just wasn't trying to compete. The tea vendor poured himself a small cup and leaned slightly against the stall. He took a slow sip, savoring not just the flavor, but the hush that came with it. Above him, the lamps shimmered softly, as though responding to his calm. It was not magic. It was not mystical. It was simply the way light behaves around serenity. It becomes kender. Far at the end of the alley, a faint golden trail marked the cobblestones like a path for the weary. It did not lead to anything extraordinary, only here, to the quietest part of night. Sometimes the most comforting places are not those filled with excitement, but the ones that let us finally stop trying to be anything at all. Time slipped by the way it always did in this alley, unnoticed. A moth fluttered near one of the lamps, drifting lazily before settling on the edge of the glass. The breeze brushed past. The tea kettle murmured. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang soft and slow. The night deepened further, wrapping everything in an even deeper shade of peace. Another traveler paused at the entrance, as though unsure. They looked back toward the busy street, then forward toward the golden calm. After a quiet moment, they chose the alley. Most people who ended up here had already chosen, long before they ever found the path. They had chosen gentleness. They had chosen slowness. They had chosen to breathe. The tea vendor greeted them with the same warm ease, pouring tea not as a transaction, but as an offering. And once again, the rhythm continued, steam rising, light glowing, thoughts softening, night unfolding. The alleyway tea stall did not try to change the world beyond its narrow stone path. It simply tended to its tiny corner of it. And sometimes that was enough, a reminder that peace doesn't need to be loud to be real. Sometimes peace is served in a small clay cup beneath golden lamps, surrounded by ordinary silence and simple kindness that reaches more deeply than words ever could. And as part 3 gently closes, the night remains open, calm, patient, and softly glowing, waiting to welcome whoever needs to wander in next. The golden lamps glowed a little deeper as the night leaned fully into itself, the way a blanket settles more closely across shoulders just before true rest arrives. Their halos thickened in the damp air, softening everything they touched. Even the cobblestones seemed quieter under the muted light, as if they had learned the art of listening. The tea vendor adjusted the flame beneath the oldest kettle, the one that hummed low and steady. It wasn't the largest nor the newest, but it held heat with a patient loyalty. The handle had been wrapped long ago in faded cloth, worn to comforting smoothness by countless hands. Every kettle, every spoon, every jar on the counter carried stories, not loud ones, not dramatic ones, just simple chapters of evenings lived gently. A fresh breeze drifted through the alleyway, brushing softly along the hanging strings of paper lanterns that had joined the lamps sometime earlier in the evening. Their faint swaying created quiet arcs of shadow that moved like slow tides. From somewhere distant came the hush of passing rain, not enough to reach this nook, only enough to perfume the air with the memory of water. It smelled like earth, like cooled stone, like a promise that nothing heavy would linger forever. The tea continued to simmer. People came and went as though guided by an unseen rhythm. No conversations needed direction, none strayed into tension. Words, when spoken, floated at the same pace as steam, lifting, easing, vanishing before they could weigh anything down. An elderly gentleman with silver hair appeared, leaning gently upon a polished cane. His steps were careful, not frail, deliberate, like someone who had learned that the world reveals more when you don't hurry past it. The tea vendor offered him a quiet smile and poured him a delicate cup without being asked. The man inhaled slowly, eyes closing for just a heartbeat, letting the warmth move into him the way dawn seeps into the horizon, hardly noticeable, yet unmistakable once it arrives. He didn't speak, and he didn't need to. His gratitude lived in the way he held the cup with reverence. Across the alley, the cat stretched from its curl and padded closer, as though checking that everyone was still safe, still peaceful. It circled once beside the stool and settled again, finding a new pocket of warmth where lamplight and steam overlapped. A soft drizzle began, threading the air with silver threads that disappeared before touching the ground. Drops tapped faintly against metal gutters and distant rooftops, not intruding, just adding texture to the stillness. The rain's rhythm harmonized with the simmering kettle, creating a lullaby that seemed composed entirely for those who needed tonight more than they knew. The tea vendor reached beneath the counter and drew out a tin, older than the others, its label faded into illegible curls. He opened it gently. Inside lay leaves darker, richer, carrying a fragrance that evoked late summer fields and quiet riverbanks. He measured them with the same trusting hand he had always used, letting them fall into an empty pot, where they landed like soft secrets finding a safe place. A traveler who had returned several nights in a row watched curiously, but said nothing. Curiosity here lived peacefully with patience. Soon, water poured over the leaves with a low whispering sound, and an entirely new note joined the alley's nightly symphony, smooth, grounding, almost like comfort finding its way into words and deciding not to speak them aloud. The tea steeped, time opened wider. The woman with the notebook reappeared, but tonight she didn't place it on the counter right away. Instead, she held the cup when it arrived and simply breathed. The steam curled over her face, softening the lines of concentration that once weighed her features. When she finally opened the notebook, she didn't rush to fill the page. She underlined a quiet sentence she had written the night before and smiled in agreement with her past self. Farther down the alley, a string of wooden wind chimes gave a gentle clink, barely audible, as if talking only to themselves. The chimes were worn smooth by seasons, and their voice had learned restraint. They spoke in whispers, never demanding to be heard, only offering their presence to the night. The younger traveler returned as well, this time with less hesitation. He sat beneath the same lamp and let the glow rest upon him like a shawl. He looked not tired, but thoughtful, as though the alley had become a place where thoughts didn't need taming, only companions. The tea vendor poured him a cup of the new blend. The first sip traveled slowly through the young man, easing corners of worry he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. His shoulders eased. His breath deepened. He set the cup down and let his fingers trail lightly along the counter grain, as though appreciating the simple sturdiness of the wood. "What do you call this one?" he finally asked, voice barely above the hush of the night. The tea vendor smiled the smallest smile. "It doesn't need a name." The answer satisfied more deeply than expected, fitting the atmosphere perfectly. Not everything needed labeling. Some moments earned their peace by remaining undefined. The elderly gentleman listened with quiet amusement, tapping a thoughtful rhythm upon his cane. The woman with the notebook paused as if absorbing the sentiment and wrote down a single word, not a title, not a definition, just something gentle to remember later. The drizzle softened, turning into rare droplets that kissed the lamplight before vanishing into air. The fog thickened again, wrapping the alley in a velvet calm that seemed to dim reality's harsher edges. Even echoes became tender. A delivery cart rumbled somewhere beyond, then faded. A shop sign creaked faintly and steadied. The night gathered all sounds and held them kindly. The tea vendor set aside his cup and leaned back slightly, letting his gaze rest along the full length of the alley. He wasn't looking for anything. He was witnessing the simple, quiet truth that peace, when allowed space, knows exactly what to do. As hours deepened, the visitors began leaving not because they wanted to escape, but because their minds felt full in a comforting way, like lungs satisfied after a deep breath. Each goodbye was a nod, a small wave, an acknowledgement that they would return when the world felt too heavy again. The cat rose, circled once around the vendor's feet, and disappeared briefly into the darkness, only to reappear moments later, settling closer than before. The vendor reached down, brushed a hand across its fur, then resumed tending the kettle. The old tin of tea leaves remained nearby, nearly empty, yet enough for tonight. He never worried about supply. Somehow, it had always lasted exactly as required. Not magic, just timing, kindness, and the patient economy of quiet places. A nearby door opened slightly, revealing the faint glow of a home inside, someone preparing for bed. Someone pausing at the threshold, hearing the rain, recognizing the peace of this alley and letting it influence the pace of their final movements for the night. The door closed gently, as if wishing good rest to everything in view. A new visitor stepped in, not hurried, not troubled, simply curious. Perhaps they had followed the glow of the lamps or the fragrance of tea. They took a stool, wrapped their hands around a freshly poured cup, and seemed to join seamlessly into the gentle rhythm, as though they had belonged here all along. That was one of the alleyway's quiet wonders. Everyone belonged instantly, not because they were welcomed loudly, but because the place did not demand adjustment. It adjusted around them softly. The sky above the narrow rooftops shifted color almost imperceptibly, a darker shade melting into another, streaked faintly with late night violet. Stars hid behind clouds, not out of gloom, but as if politely giving the lamps center stage. Eventually, the elderly gentleman finished his drink, tapped his cane twice in gratitude, and stood. He held the vendor's gaze for a moment, conveying without speech that something deep inside him felt steadier. Then he walked slowly out of the alley, his steps blending into the night's calm cadence. The younger traveler stayed a little longer, then quietly set coins beside the cup and whispered, "I think I'll sleep well tonight." It wasn't a promise, nor a wish, simply a recognition. He left with the ease of someone who knew he could always return. Only a few remain, each seated within their own pool of golden light, each wrapped in silence that comforted rather than isolated. The fog eased. The drizzle faded entirely, and the chimes stilled, as if the night itself had laid down. The vendor finally poured the last of the nameless tea for himself. He lifted the cup slowly, paused to breathe the aroma, and let the warmth spread inside. It wasn't pride he felt, nor ownership. It was companionship, the quiet companionship of a night that understood rest as gently as he did. Around him, everything continued to exist exactly as it needed, to the lamps glowing, the cat sleeping, the wooden counter bearing stories without speaking them, the kettles giving off their soft, steady murmurs. Nothing competed, nothing rushed, nothing tried to become more than it was. And within that simplicity, peace deepened further. As midnight stretched softly forward, the alleyway felt less like a location and more like a state of being, as though anyone who found it carried a little of it back into the world, scattering fragments of calm wherever they walked. The vendor let the moment linger, not trying to hold it still, but appreciating its passing the way one appreciates waves, appearing, softening, receding, always returning in some form. And beneath the golden lamps, as the night continued gently forward, the tea stall remained exactly what it had always been. A quiet invitation, a place where thoughts loosen, a place that never asks too much and never sends anyone away unchanged, only lighter. The kettle hummed once more, steady and kind, The alley, wrapped in warmth and whispered lamplight, rested. The night slipped further into its softest hour, that delicate stretch of time when even the whispers of the city seemed to forget themselves. The sky, washed with deep velvet blue, rested overhead like a blanket that had finally found the perfect shape. The golden lamps above the alleyway glowed with a warmer, deeper hue now. Their light no longer shone outward in wide circles, but instead folded inward, becoming more intimate, more close, as if the entire world had agreed to lower its voice. Steam curled from teacups in graceful ribbons, fading slowly into the calm air. It rose like thoughts that used to feel heavy, now drifting, dissolving free. You sat at the familiar wooden table, fingers wrapped gently around the smooth porcelain of your cup. The vendor moved unhurriedly, the way someone does when every moment is already complete. It was as though time here was not something to chase, but something that simply exhaled and rested. The last tea of the night brewed quietly. The gentle sound of liquid pouring filled the silence with its own kind of music, delicate, patient, endlessly soothing. The vendor smiled softly, a smile that said more than words ever needed to. "You do not need to carry so much," he murmured, almost like a memory speaking. Tea teaches us that warmth travels best when we don't hold it too tightly. He set the cup in front of you. The aroma wrapped around you like a calm embrace, soft florals, a hint of honey, and the subtle earthiness of leaves that had been touched by sunlight long before this night ever came. You lifted the cup. The first sip moved through you slowly, and with it came the feeling that the world was finally exhaling, and you with it. Across the alley, the shadows softened into comfortable shapes. The small shop windows glowed faintly with the quiet life inside them, shelves waiting for morning, wooden counters resting from the day's work. A cat stretched near the base of one of the lantern poles, then curled itself back into peaceful stillness, as if the very ground were a pillow. The cobblestones felt warmer now, their edges smoothed by the way light brushed over them. The air was neither cool nor warm, just balanced, like a moment suspended perfectly between thoughts. You felt something loosen inside your chest, not suddenly, not dramatically, just gently, naturally, as though your mind had finally decided it did not need to solve anything tonight. The vendor leaned against his counter, folding a cloth with deliberate care, every motion slow, quiet, almost meditative. "There is a kindness in the night," he said, without looking up. "It does not ask us to be impressive. It only asks us to rest." His words floated through the space like lantern light, soft and golden, settling wherever they were needed. And as you listened, you realized the alleyway wasn't simply a place, it was a pause, a gentle resting point between everything that had been and everything that would come. Somewhere beyond the narrow walls, the world still existed, streets winding into neighborhoods, homes filled with their own quiet stories, dreams waiting behind closed windows. But here it felt distant, softened, wrapped in the kind of silence that arrives when comfort becomes more important than answers. A breeze drifted through, barely enough to move the fabric of the vendor's awning. Yet you felt it brush against your skin, light as a whisper, like the night itself acknowledging your presence and saying, "You are allowed to be still." You took another sip of tea. It felt like the warmth moved through your shoulders, down your arms, into your hands. Your breath deepened, growing slower, more natural. The thoughts that had been flickering earlier, worries, questions, unfinished plans, began to fade into softer shades. They didn't disappear all at once. Instead, they simply stepped back, gave you space, gave you peace. The vendor finished tidying and finally rested both hands on the counter, looking at the lantern light with a thoughtful, gentle expression. "Every evening, people come here," he said quietly. "Some carry heavy stories, some carry silence, but all of them leave with a little bit more room inside." He tapped the side of his teapot affectionately. "This," he continued, "is not really about tea." He paused. "It is about reminding the heart how to soften." You nodded, not because you fully understood, but because something in those words felt right, felt honest, felt like a deep truth that did not require explanation. Your eyelids grew heavier, not tired, just peacefully weighted, like leaves resting after a long day in the sun. The golden lamps flickered gently. Their glow shimmered across the edges of everything: the wooden counter, the small cup, the lines in the vendor's face, shaped by years of quiet smiles. Time felt like it was dissolving again, stretching into something slower, a longer, a softer. The vendor poured himself a small cup and joined you on the opposite side of the table, not as a host, but as a companion, someone simply sharing the night. "For a long time," he said, "I used to chase busy mornings. I rushed. I measured my worth by how much I could do." He breathed out slowly. "But then I discovered nights like this, and they taught me that peace is not earned." His eyes lifted to the lanterns. "It is welcome." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, quietly filled with warmth, with gentle awareness, with the soft hum of life simply existing. A distant clock chimed somewhere, not loud, not demanding, just a friendly reminder that time was moving kindly forward. You let the sound fade through you, like ripples disappearing across a calm pond. Your shoulders relaxed, your breath slowed deeper. Another sip of tea, another ribbon of warmth drifting through your chest. Sleep began approaching like a soft tide, not rushing, not pulling, just easing higher wrapping around you inch by inch. The vendor noticed, and his smile warmed. "Good," he whispered. "This alleyway was meant for moments like this." He stood, moving softly to extinguish one of the lanterns. The light dimmed, not into darkness, but into an even gentler glow. The world became quieter still. He walked back, his steps light, his presence calm, carrying with him the sense that everything was unfolding exactly as it should. "You don't need to stay awake to keep the world together," he said gently. "It knows how to rest, too." You let the words settle. The night deepened, yet felt even safer. The alley now existed in soft shadows and honey-colored light. The tea beside you remained warm. The air was perfectly still. Somewhere above, a moth fluttered lazily near the lantern, unafraid, unhurried, drifting as peacefully as your thoughts. You rested your hands on the table, your fingers barely moving, your mind drifting like a boat gently rocking on quiet water. The vendor reached out and lightly touched the rim of your teacup, as if blessing the last sip you would take tonight. "Let the world be gentle for you," he murmured, and somehow you believed it would be. Your eyes lowered half shut. The lantern light turned softer still. The alley felt like a dream that had chosen to stay for just a little while longer, long enough to cover everything that once felt restless, long enough to help you let go. The vendor returned to his counter and began putting away the last few items, each motion slow, quiet, intentional. Teaspoons slid softly into their places. Cups rested in their wooden rack. The kettle's lid closed with the faintest, most comforting sound. It was like watching someone pack away the day itself, gently, lovingly, knowing that morning would come in its own time without being pushed. He glanced toward you again, making sure you were comfortable, making sure the night continued to support you. And when he spoke this time, his voice seemed woven into the lantern globe. Peace doesn't arrive loudly, it settles. Just like this, another lantern dimmed, leaving only the nearest one glowing. The light now fell across the table in soft gold, like the final brushstroke on a finished painting. The vendor folded his hands together and closed his eyes for a brief moment, not in silence, but in gratitude. And the alleyway, sensing this tender stillness, seemed to breathe along with him. You let your thoughts drift wherever they wished, slow, dreamlike, unimportant. Memories flickered in and out like distant lights, never staying long, never demanding attention. Everything softened into warm edges, into comfort, into rest. The vendor opened his eyes and said one last quiet thing, not as advice, not as instruction, but as a blessing carried on calm air. "Tonight, may your heart wander nowhere but here." The lantern above you glowed deeper, softer, like a star easing itself into the sky. Around you, the alley blurred gently, not fading away, but transforming into the kind of place that follows you into sleep, where footsteps turn into echoes of dreams and tea becomes a memory of warmth resting in your hands. You felt yourself finally ready to drift, not pushed, not urged, simply allowed. The vendor lifted his hand in a slow, reassuring gesture, as though saying rest well, without needing to speak. And the night, kind and unhurried, wrapped itself around you completely. The world was quiet, the lamps were golden, and everything was at peace. Stay here a little longer, in this quiet, in this warm glow of memory, where nothing needs to hurry, and nothing is expected of you anymore. You are resting now, fully welcome, fully allowed. The golden lamps of the alleyway have become softer in your thoughts, still glowing, still comforting, still present, but now they feel like distant lanterns guiding you safely inward, deeper and deeper toward peace. The tea vendor's gentle smile lingers somewhere in the background of your awareness, not as a character in a story, not as someone you must remember or think about, but simply as a feeling, a quiet reassurance that kindness exists, that calm exists, that rest is here. You do not need to hold the story anymore. You don't need to turn pages in your mind. You don't need to stay awake to keep track of anything. Everything is already taken care of. Let the scene soften. Let it grow dim in the most comforting way. The alleyway, the lamps, the steam from the tea, they can gently fade now, like slow ripples settling on a calm lake, like thoughts dissolving into quiet space. There is nothing to return to, nothing to fix, nothing to remember. All that remains is this soft drifting, this steady warmth, this feeling of being held gently by the night itself. Take a slow breath in, not forced, just natural. Then let it fall out again, longer, quieter, easier. Feel the way your shoulders loosen just a little more. Feel the heaviness in your arms. Feel your body giving itself permission to rest. Even your thoughts are becoming slow and heavy, like leaves settling onto still water, like feathers floating down until they finally touch the ground and stay there, comfortable and quiet. You have nothing to prove in this moment, no role to perform, no decisions to make. The day has already completed its work. The night is gently closing around you like soft fabric, tucking you in with peaceful intention. There is a deep calm inside this moment, a calm that doesn't demand your attention, but supports you quietly beneath everything else, like gentle hands beneath your breath. You are safe. You are warmed by calm. You are allowed to let go. Imagine now the feeling of simply being carried, as if the atmosphere itself has become soft and buoyant, and you are floating on its surface, weightless, supported without effort. This is the part of night where overthinking has nothing useful to say. Thoughts may wander close for a moment, then drift away again, gently, peacefully, without urgency. Each thought becomes lighter, each memory becomes dimmer, each worry becomes softer, like mist disappearing under morning sunlight, except there is no morning yet, just endless, gentle night, stretching out comfortingly. Let your breath guide everything now. In slow and easy, out slower, quieter, softer still, like waves lapping quietly at the shore. No rush, no resistance, just natural release. Your body knows how to do this. Your mind, even when busy, remembers how to soften this way. You are simply following the natural slope downward into deeper stillness, into quieter dreams, into restful sleep waiting patiently beneath you. The golden memory of the tea vendor becomes nothing more than warmth, like the last sip of something sweet before bed. His peaceful words now echo only as sensations. You may rest. You are allowed to loosen your grip on the day. Everything that matters will still be there when you wake, calmer, easier, gentler. Those words don't need to stay clear. They can dissolve into the background, blending with the soft rhythm of your breathing. Feel how your eyelids grow heavier, how your jaw loosens, how your hands grow still. Your body is quietly saying, "Yes, this is the moment I have been waiting for." And the night answers back, "I am here, rest with me." The alleyway fades into starlit darkness, not empty darkness, but peaceful darkness, like velvet wrapped around you. You sense that you are no longer sitting, no longer listening, no longer following a story. You are simply resting, suspended in warmth, suspended in stillness, suspended in a deeply soothing quiet. This quiet has a softness to it, the softness of blankets, the softness of gentle water, the softness of a whisper saying that everything is just fine the way it is. The world is breathing beside you, slowly and calmly, and you are breathing with it. Nothing pulls you forward, nothing pulls you backward. You are here, perfectly, gently, peacefully here. If a thought arrives, let it pass. You don't need to engage it. You don't need to answer it. Imagine opening your hand and letting it float away, carried off on the slow current of the night. Another thought may come, and it too drifts away, again and again, peacefully, quietly, without effort. There is only space now, soft sparkling space, like quiet night sky behind closed eyes. Your breath becomes the only rhythm you follow, slow drifting steady. Each inhale is ease, each exhale is release. Relax deeper into the surface beneath you. Feel gravity doing the work for you, gently pulling you downward, grounding you, reassuring you that you don't have to hold yourself up anymore. You can simply sink and rest. Let the story become nothing more than a feeling, the feeling of golden lamplight glowing faintly somewhere in the distance. the feeling of tea warming your hands, the feeling of peace finally arriving after a long day. You don't have to picture it clearly. You don't have to stay connected to details. Even the idea of the alleyway can fade now, becoming softer and softer, fading like a comforting dream halfway remembered. What remains is stillness, gentleness, soft reassurance, and it is all you need. You are being cradled by the night, wrapped softly in quiet, settled into safety. No matter what life holds beyond this moment, none of it needs you right now. The world can wait. Responsibilities can wait. Thoughts can wait. Sleep is the only thing invited in. Deep, calm, steady sleep. Sleep that doesn't pull, it welcomes. Sleep that doesn't push thoughts away. It simply becomes larger than them until they fade from view. Your breaths grow slower. Your mind drifts farther out. Your awareness loosens its grip, like fingers releasing at last. You are drifting, floating, sinking into softness, all at once and gently, peacefully, easily. There is nothing left to follow, nothing left to hear, just soothing quiet, like deep water at night, like hills resting under moonlight, like rooms where every light has been turned low and every sound has decided to sleep. You are surrounded by that peace, and you belong inside it. The night holds you, warm, safe, complete. Let yourself drift fully now into that wordless place where dreams begin forming softly, carefully, kindly. Let them come gently. Let them unfurl slowly. You do not need to watch them. You don't even need to know when sleep arrives. It will arrive on its own, quiet as a whisper, calm as a slow tide returning to shore, and you will simply be carried with it, further inward, deeper downward, into the most restful part of the night. Rest now. Soften. Sink into the pillow. Feel your breath moving like a lullaby, steady, gentle, soothing. Everything is okay. Everything can wait. You are safe to sleep. You are welcome to sleep. You are already drifting there, quietly, peacefully, completely, into warm, deep, restoring rest. And the night keeps watch for you, calm, patient, endlessly gentle, until morning arrives in its own time. Sleep, sleep, sleep.